All right, welcome back everyone to our webinar series, Embracing Change. Thank you, Ronald, for waking up this early. I know for you it's your norm, waking up for meditation and starting your day and leveraging the energy that's available, right? And the universe provides at sunrise. So thank you, Ronald, for being with us today. Truly, truly grateful. And you know, you've been in the space beyond, way before I think I was probably 4 or 5 years old, when you were already entrenched into the integrative space in the 70s. And you've trained with some of the most incredible leaders of the time. And you were, again, at that time, way ahead of the curve, even in the 70s. So really an absolute honor. Thank you for being with us today. And let's start. I mean, you said you wanted to begin with a meditation that you want to walk us through. So maybe you want to give a brief description, and then we can all begin.
Okay, so this is a meditation for enhancing your core abilities to go inside and to connect to the inner leader. And so one of the things that I teach in trainings on leadership, and what I frequently do is do workshops on the art of leadership and the art of the mindful leader, is the importance that to start your day from a place of going inside and being receptive, and to be connected to your essence, to what I call the core. Some people like to refer to it perhaps as communing with your soul or your creative unconscious. And Milton Erickson, who was the wizard of the desert, and I had the opportunity to work with him many, many times, told me that the best way to be connected to the core of your being is to take time each and every day and get quiet and get very still. And this was something that came to him very naturally, because as a young child, he developed polio, and he had to sit in a wheelchair, and he was confined to looking outside and watching the other kids play. And he found that by spending many, many hours a day just looking outside at nature, that it started to take him inside, where he began to connect and develop a personal relationship with his core and his inner self. And so in this meditation, all I would like everyone to do is to sit up straight, take your thumb and your first fingers, and place them in your lap, palms facing upward. Focus your eyes on the tip of your nostrils with your eyes closed. And just notice and pay attention to the quality of your breathing. And just simply notice whether you're breathing on the out breath or the in breath. And pay attention to the rising and falling of your abdomen. And as you pay attention to the in breath, simply repeat the phrase silently, receiving comfort. And as you're breathing out on your out breath, simply repeat the phrase going inside and deepening, going inside and deepening. So that as we catch the natural wave of the in-breath, we're repeating, receiving comfort. And as we let go of the breath, on the out breath, repeat the phrase, going inside and deepening. And the core leader, he or she or he, each and every morning may choose to attune themselves to the nature of what I call receiving from the inner core, receiving from your rich inner world, and connecting to that core. And sometimes as we're breathing, we're receiving comfort. And on the out breath, we're deepening, going inside. Sometimes you may experience that there's a richness of ideas or imagery, thoughts about how you want to approach something in the workplace, thoughts or images or ideas about something creative. So there's a simple noticing. When there's extraneous thoughts, the mind's just distracted, just notice that, but bring your attention and pair your attention to setting in the mind's eye the intention to connect to your core. Sometimes we refer to the core as the authentic self. Sometimes we refer to the core as the richness of our unconscious mind. And some folks like to refer to receiving from the core as receiving from the essence of one's being. And that's right. Just simply paying attention. To receiving comfort on the in-breath. Going inside and deepening on the out-breath. And simply noticing as you pair your attention with your intention to receive and connect to the inner core. And the core leader, just like a musician, they tune their instrument each and every day. That's right. Each and every breath, taking you deeper and deeper into that place and into that space of receiving and being very curious about what you're receiving from the inside. And then using this very last minute of connecting with the core meditation, to simply notice and scan your own body's physiology. So where does energy feel alive? Where does energy feel flowing in the body, mind? And where is energy maybe blocked or stagnated? And wherever you feel energy flowing, just to simply notice that. And wherever you feel energy blocked or stagnated, just direct your breath there. And simply notice what happens when you simply bring your breath to that area of your body. Connecting to each and every wave of the breath, connecting to each and every wave of physical and energetic energy in your own energy body. The core leader connects to a quality of aliveness and leads from that passionate place of aliveness. So very slowly now, bring your meditation to a completion and take 3 deep breaths into the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose, out through the mouth. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And then very slowly, just let your eyes start to open back into the room. Rub your palms together and then stretch your arms up over your head. Turn left, turn right. And then relax your arms. Shake out your body a little bit. Feet, legs. And just simply notice how you feeling in this moment now compared to when we began the meditation. Okay, Feisal.
So, thank you. Thank you for that. So, Ronald, let's start very, very basic. I know we can go very deep, very fast, but let's start from the basics, right? So, when you use the word even leadership, what does that mean from the various contexts of day-to-day organizations and beyond?
Well, I think it's important, Feisal, to understand true leadership as the authentic expression of your own beingness. And that your beingness is about how you radiate a quality of influence into the world through a series of dynamic conversations. And I call those conversations for action. and conversations for leadership. And for me, leadership is first and foremost about attending to the management of my own self and the attention to the cultivation of my own spiritual awareness of myself as a leader, and an awareness of when we're leading, what is the game that we're really in? Now, of course, in all business, one of the core tenets of business is bottom line. And we want to be involved in businesses that are profitable, because we're playing in a game where energy in, energy out, growth, progress. In my model of leadership, or our model of leadership, I also see that we're also playing in a consciousness arena, or a consciousness game. And that in addition to the cultivation of the bottom line, what I see as essential and primary is myself as a leader, as someone who grows people. In the same way that when I was a young boy in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, we had a very big piece of land, and I had a garden. And my job was to plant in the springtime all the little seeds. And then all summer long, I had to weed and I had to fertilize, because the neighbor next door had a lot of chickens. And so we would take all the chicken residue and we would use it as fertilizer. And over the course of the summer, I would watch tiny little seeds grow into plants. And then the plants would grow tomatoes. And then we would pluck the tomatoes, and then next day would be in a salad on the dinner table. And so that in the consciousness game is when we're doing business from the leadership perspective of leading as a spiritual being, it's about growing people. And so there has to be the foremost attention to that every conversation that you have from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep at night is an opportunity to transform people's consciousness and to create transformation, as well as to facilitate change in the enhancement of my awareness, my spiritual well-being, in the awareness of the other, in the transformation of the other. So some core principles when one is playing in the spiritual game is leading from integrity, that your word is your truth. And it's very, very important to pay attention to when or if you find that you're functioning out of integrity, and always come back into integrity. That's the most important thing, I think, is to lead from a place of integrity and to trust that the people that you're leading, that they can really trust your word, and that you also stand for something, and that what you stand for is the growth of yourself, the growth of their self, and the growth of your company or your organization or your university. And that we're dynamic beings interacting in units of interaction throughout the day. And we have to remember that this is a sphere of conscious engagement about growth and about opportunity and about consciousness change for myself and for the other.
So you mentioned one was integrity. Are there other key elements that would be essential, or is that the one foundational piece?
Well, integrity. Second is awareness. Awareness of myself, awareness of the other. The third is the cultivation of leading from a place of curiosity, being really curious about what brings to life the people that you're leading. What are they passionate about? Operating from a place of attentive awareness of the people that you're leading, how you interact with them, such that it brings forth them to step into taking action that lead towards the team or the organization or other members within the organization to feel as if that they're thriving and that they're winning. The next quality that I believe the mindful leader needs to radiate is one of compassion and empathy. And empathy is the capacity for me to feel your pain, for me to feel what you might be feeling. And compassion is to have an open heart, a generousness of open-heartedness. And part of that generous open-heartedness necessitates that a leader have the capacity to embrace that qualities of care and concern and genuine interest in the people that they're leading, that you're genuinely interested in growing other people. And that it's not just about growing your organization or your company or your family-owned business. It's that you're really dedicated to growing yourself. And because you're dedicated to growing yourself, you're dedicated to the growth of the people in your organization. And you want them to thrive, you want them to win. And so when you have to point things out or function from a place of criticism about error, is to have a quality of both empathy and compassion for what the other person might be experiencing. And to be really conscious aware when you're operating from integrity is that the power of one's word is very creative. And the power of one's word is also can be very destructive.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and Gandhi used to say, the greatest leadership is when you bring no harm. The greatest leadership is when you bring no harm to those whom you're leading, but you bring the highest level of spiritual evolution, where you're broadening their consciousness and you're providing an opportunity where people can grow as individuals, as leaders, and as spiritual beings.
So as you describe this, right, and we look at the practicalities where the rubber meets the road, right, where we're trying to, so basically basically this way of being, then the byproduct is the profit and the external success that society labels as success. So now how do we find that balance, or is it just the way it is? And if you can give us some examples of companies that you've worked with or companies that exist or that are actually able to create this incredible way of being from inside out.
Well, the couple of companies that I worked with, Apple and then Sun Microsystems. Years ago, I was leading a retreat at the Esalen Institute on the art of leadership, and some of the mid-level executives from Apple were present in the retreat, and there was about 6 or 7 of them. And so we created an inner circle. And this was at a time when Steve Jobs was still outside of the organization. And I offered them this opportunity to sit and be part of what I called a wise council of support inside of the circle of the other 36 participants that were in the outer support circle. And so the intention was to allow people to activate their, what I call their creative imagineering as leaders. And so I took a pulse of each person in the inner circle from Apple and asked them to describe, with no holds barred, if they could create the perfect work setting, the perfect future Apple, what would it look like? And it was at a time when Scully was still the president, and he was driving it into the ground, and they were living on fumes. They were about to actually be bought out by, I think Dell had a huge offer on the table to them. And I said, just allow your imagination to be as wild as it can possibly be. No holds barred. In almost every single person in that group, when they had the opportunity to share, in addition to certain things about product design and what products that they would get rid of and what people they would get rid of, who they would keep, every single person said, we would reach out to Steve Jobs and bring him back because he was our original visionary. He was the original co-founder, him and Wozniak. And so I said to them, so as a collective, what would be the best way to begin the process of reaching out to bring him back? And so they started dialoguing amongst themselves. And of course, it was, we have to start reaching out to board members. Now, on another plane of consciousness, Steve Jobs was reaching out to the board members on his own. And he had been outside the company for like 14 years at this point, because he had been fired by Scully. And there was this kind of very interesting, what I would call the morphogenetic field of leadership, where you have one person in the organization who has the same thought, image, or idea that another person has, and then another person has it, and then something outside of the organization begins to attune to that, and or there's this morphogenetic engagement back and forth on a plane that we don't really quite understand, but it's what I call, it's co-occurring in separate planes of reality. And then within, I think, 16 months after they started talking with board members and Steve Jobs was talking with board members, the board invited Steve and appointed him, I think it was for like $1 a year. He was going to come back and be the temporary CEO of the company. And they pushed and got Scully out. And when Steve Jobs came back in, the very first thing that he did was that instead of operating from a place of complexity, he took out the big whiteboard and he put up all of the current products that Apple was selling. What were the winners? What were the losers? And he took the complexity of all of these, I think it was like 24 different products, and none of them were really doing all that well. And he defined them down into just 4. And that became his game plan. And that was the vision of how to move Apple from a place of bankruptcy to a place of where now, I think their current holdings like $80 billion they have in the bank. We've got the iPod, iMacs, iPhone. So that it's really important as a leader when you're attempting to facilitate consciousness or change is you give people that you're working with an opportunity to creatively imagine and to creatively imagine outside the boundaries and the frontiers of what they think is possible. And when one of the people in that inner Apple circle said, "Oh, that bringing Steve, that will never happen," he'll never be brought back in. And I said at that point, okay, let's just stop there and change never and no to just try on what it's like to say yes. It's possible. And that had also a rippling effect amongst all of the core individuals. And it reminds me of another leadership example of what I call operating from optimum possibility in holding a yes set as opposed to a no set. Is I was called in to work with the marketing and advertising department of one of the music studios in Los Angeles. And they'd had a very, very successful recording artist. Can't name the name because of non-disclosure agreements, but very mega music recording artist. And her first 2 or 3 albums were just mega successes. The 4th one was a real turkey, and it only sold in the first couple of weeks 10,000 units. And usually it would be like 10,000 units in a day. So I was called in, and I sat there and I said to them, I'm going to do a couple of things with you. I'm going to sit here, and here's my yellow pad, and I'm just going to listen. And so I listened to them for about 20, 30 minutes. And all I did was record how many times the word yes was used and how many times the word no was used. And the word no was used 76 times, and the word yes was used 11. And so I said to them, okay, this is the plane of consciousness that you're operating from, that you're operating from a place of no possibilities, and a very limited resource base of yes sets, of yes, we can, yes, we can create. So I did a mindfulness meditation very similar to what we just did, but with some adjustments. And then I said, okay, now continue your meeting. And after another 20 or 30 minutes, I shared with them the feedback, and there was 54 yeses and there was 19 no's, meaning that we just shifted just by doing the meditation and by pointing out to them with awareness that they were functioning from the no set versus the yes set. That feedback, coupled with the meditation of going inside, and I also said, set the intention of what will it be like to operate and shift from no to possibility, to shift from no, it's not possible, the rigid no set to a more fluid, open, expansive yes set. And that just opened up the frame. And then I came in with that one of the ideas was that this recording artist, what had contributed to the success of her first 3 records was that they used to put her on a tour bus and have her go to all the major cities in the US and to go to the radio stations like KLOS in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and say, hi, this is da-da-da-da, and this is KLOS FM Los Angeles, and you're listening to my new CD. And at first, there were several key people that said, oh no, that's not possible. She's too much of a diva now. She's so successful, she'll never do that. And so I said, let's go back into the meditation. And this time I want you to visualize that we're going to call her. And she's going to say, yes, that is a great idea. So we went in, did the meditation, brought everybody back out, and seizing the importance of like, be here now, I said to the senior executive, call her right now and get her people on the phone and get her on the phone. And I said, and tell her what I just suggested, that we're going to get her on a bus and she's going to go around the country and she's going to do callbacks everywhere. And if there's any resistance, just simply ask her, do you want to improve the sales of your record by 2, 3, 4, 5, 10-fold? Or are you happy and comfortable with 10,000 units? Because I knew that she was not going to say, yeah, I'm happy with 10,000 units. And so we called her, we got her on the phone, got our people on the phone, and there was a long pause, and she said, I don't know who came up with this idea, but this is a good idea. I'm ready to go. And we'll talk to my people and get that bus ready. And then, make a long story short, over the course of a month of her being on the road, her units went up from like 10,000 units up into a couple of million in sales of CDs. And so that's an example of where a leader needs to be creative and needs to tune into, well, what is the mindset that's operating, that's closing off possibility, and to create an intervention in an interaction to shift from the negative, rigid mindset to more imaginative, more fluid and open mindset.
This was in your book, wasn't it? Because I read this in your book many years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember.
Yeah, and to this day, I get emails from people who are at that meeting, and they say, never forget, that the Zen doc said, focus on the yes, not on the no. Yeah. That the yes is creative and the no is limiting.
So so one, we've got this meditation, we've got this process, you've described the elements and the characteristics or the core traits of this leading from within inner leader. Now, what are the elements that create fear or resistance within that we can learn to work with? Like, what are the key elements that you see that kind of inhibit or limit us in that space that you can share with us so that we can always remember and then flip as that inner voice comes?
Well, first and foremost is the attention to what you just said, Feisal, and that's very insightful. The inner voice is to bring mindful attention to, well, what is my inner dialogue? Is it an inner dialogue of yes and possibility, and I can do, and we can create, and we can imagine, we can innovate, we can invent, we can grow people? Or is it an inner dialogue of negativity and fixed, rigid mindsets? And it's important, and that's why in what I call taking time for the hour of power each morning, where I sit for 40 minutes in mindfulness meditation, then I take 10 minutes to read something that is very inspiring to me. And then I take 10 minutes and I write in my mindfulness journal. Because oftentimes when I'm meditating, I get very creative ideas and images and concepts. If I'm right now, I'm writing a book, so a lot of it's about my own writing. But when I'm consulting and doing leadership work and doing work with organizations and families, I'll oftentimes meditate on where people are stuck. And so that's one thing, that is paying attention to that inner voice and then learning over time to shift from the negative voice to bringing in, well, what's the voice of positivity? Oftentimes, the negative voice comes from either one or both parents who were harshly judgmental. Yeah, in Freudian psychology, we call this that the parents came from and functioned from a place of the harsh inner critic. And so there was a criticalness, a judgmentalness, a harsh tone. And the antidote to that harsh critical inner voice is for the leader to bring in, well, what's the positive antidote? The opposite of the harsh voice would be the voice of inspiration, empathy, the voice of compassion, the voice of loving kindness, the voice of possibility. In your meditation is to shift from the negative critical voice to the more positive voice. And sometimes it's best to just embody of, well, if I had the most positive parent, the most loving and inspiring, a parent like a coach. My coaches in sports, in junior high and high school, were incredibly inspirational. And I learned that inspiration was a key piece to leadership. And so that one needs to bring in the component of connecting internally with the positive inner voice that can inspire you, and then therefore you can inspire others.
Okay. So now what are you seeing now? You've started this journey from the 70s and obviously built out, and you're writing the new book, and I'm not asking to share too much of the new book, obviously, that you want to keep it as much, but what are you seeing now that is really developing in the last couple of years or coming forward? Like where are we headed in terms of this leadership and that inner voice and that inner guidance and that soul, or whatever word you want to use? What are you seeing?
I think we're in, there's an old Chinese proverb, and the proverb is, I curse that you may live in interesting times. I curse that you may live in interesting times. And what I see is that we are in very, very interesting times, particularly coming out of the world pandemic. And most of the people that I'm coaching right now have been sequestered and sheltered in place for 15 months. And like myself, where I had a lot of opportunity to meditate over the last 15 months and take a lot of solo, quiet, long walks, is I think Silicon Valley is just bubbling. People have so much stored up fresh and new energy that I think what we're going to see is almost like a renaissance coming out of the pandemic. It's like we had this huge garden, and then all these weeds came in, and sadly, many of the plants died off or got very, very sick. But then the rest of us, though, got really quiet, slowed down our lifestyles, slowed down our work pace. And I think there's a richness of new energy that's going to be channeled and harnessed to see very quickly a lot of innovation and a lot of invention and a lot of reshaping of how business used to be done. And hopefully, in our model, is to see that business is really fundamentally a consciousness game, and it's about transformation. And I think we're going to see, coming out of Silicon Valley especially, is enormous creativity. I think people in the last 15 months have taken a lot of time to really cultivate their inner worlds. And because they've already done that, I think what you're going to see is that energy inside is going to come flying out and be directed in very creative ways to build and to reshape and to restructure how we do business. And first and foremost, with a new awareness that who we do business with is first and foremost the most essential thing, is how we engage ourselves with other people. I think the pandemic has really also taught us about compassion and about suffering. and we're still experiencing suffering. For example, some of the people that I coach in India, family members, their mothers, their fathers, their uncles, their aunts are dying each and every day. And so I think it takes us into a place now where we're much more heartful and soulfully aware. And I think in the last 15 months, we've had the opportunity to get quiet and to really pay attention to the soul and pay attention to our own inner core. And people have had a lot of opportunities to sleep and to rest. And in my own experience, I've had a lot of dreams. And I mean, I'm writing away. I just took the last 2 weeks off and I was in Hawaii, and I was writing 3-4 hours a day. Some days I would write for 5 hours. And if I compare myself now to where I was 15 months ago, I would have maybe got 1 or 2 hours in a day and then got on email and distracted myself. And now I'm much more focused. There's this importance of being here now and being fully in the moment and living fully for the moment. And I think that energy is going to be brought back into the workplace, which is going to have this wonderful morphogenetic manifestation of continual waves of energy, of passion, and vitality and creativity. So I think we're in a really exciting time in history, coming out of a very difficult time.
So you feel the stillness is really going to create a shift in consciousness in terms of the way business is done, how companies are led, how people show up, how people interact. And this is at all levels. You feel that this has happened at all levels.
Yes,
I think we're on the verge of the tipping point, you feel, because that's the dream that we've been talking about for a long time. And
that's right.
You feel that we're almost there, or we're there.
I think we're in the very first formative stages of it. And
Okay.
as painful as the pandemic was, is oftentimes like in the farming model again of leadership, sometimes you have to let your best fields grow what's called fallow.
Yeah.
You don't farm them for 1, 2, 3 years. Yeah. You just fertilize them. They get still. And so that then when you plant new seeds, the crop that comes up, it's much fuller and much hardier. And I have CEOs coming in to my Santa Monica office now, very kind of, to just use a stereotype, who have traditionally been very rigid in their thinking. And most of what we were talking about today might have been over their head. And they're coming in now and they're asking me, without my even bringing things up, about, gee, I spent a lot of time quiet in the last 15 months. And I feel like something has shifted inside of me. Can you teach me how to keep that going? Wow. Because not only am I coming up with more inventive and innovative ideas for my company and my teams, but in my family, I'm closer to my daughters. One fella came in, he's got 3 daughters, and he said, we've never been closer as a family because we spent a lot of time just being together, walking, eating, listening to music, watching television shows on Netflix, reading together. And something very profound shifted in the energy field of the family. And what I've been emphasizing to them is that, and it's because something uniquely shifted inside of you. And that's happened all over the world. Okay. The people that I coach in Europe and Shanghai, everybody's been telling me that they've spent a lot of time learning to appreciate quiet and stillness. and that they're discovering things about themselves and about the richness of their inner life, their inner world. Many of the executives I've been talking to said, I was always too busy to dream. And now I realize I wake up in the morning and I have to furiously write down, I have so many dreams. The pandemic has made me dream. And I say, the pandemic has slowed you down so that you have the time and the space to actually notice that you've been dreaming. And you've just been too busy to watch the movie of that when you wake up in your old self. And now you're waking up and you're not just jumping out of bed like you used to. You're waking up and you're taking that time to be quiet and to still. And when you're meditating in the morning, you're watching what your unconscious has been providing you. And see, dreams, Freud said dream is the royal road to the unconscious. And the dream, like the myth, like the image, are all key elements that are the guideposts that our unconscious, our soul, our core, is supplying us every night. And all we need to do is start to slow down, get still, and start to look and to watch and to observe, to witness. So I do feel that the world at large, and especially the world of leadership, is going to be taking, and has already begun, and it started with slowing down during the pandemic, a quantum leap in consciousness change.
So even so, what I'm hearing you is that some of them were not intentionally doing it. It just happened because of the fact that they weren't traveling, they were working from home. Their children happened to be home because they were also not able to go to school or university or whatever they were up to or work. And as a result, the ecosystem allowed this stillness, which then created this knowing that they didn't really understand. And they're coming to you and saying, I want to continue this. This is something different. But what about from the consciousness perspective? I mean, that's the creativity side. Even from do you see a shift in terms of integrity? Are you seeing a shift in terms of that compassion, empathy, and all of those elements? Is that core also coming up, or is that very individual?
Both. And Feisal, you said something really, really beautiful, and that was about the ecosystem. And that by slowing down, all of us have affected the ecosystems that we operate within. And the pandemic, by forcing us to slow down, has also allowed us to kind of soften and melt some of the rigidities that we may have had around being more open-hearted and being more compassionate and kind to both ourselves and to others.
Okay.
And I think it's happening in a collective, and it's idiosyncratic. I don't think every single person has been affected in the way that I'm describing, but I think more people have been than not, far more people. Okay. And in the morphogenetic field metaphor, which I've mentioned a couple of times, but I'll just briefly share. There's a little book, I'm sure it's still on Amazon. It's called The 100 Monkey Phenomena. Okay. Remember that? It's a book about that monkeys in the South Pacific, they used to eat sweet potatoes that were covered with sand. And then one day, one of the monkeys rolled his sweet potato into the water and washed it. And then on a faraway island, 100,000 miles away, other monkeys started rolling their sweet potatoes into the water and washing the sand off it. And so it's called the 100 monkey phenomena. Quantum physics refers to it as the morphogenetic influence of change. And so that when you, Feisal, in Hong Kong, or me, Ron, here in Santa Monica, when we sit and meditate for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, once or twice a day, we're creating a morphogenetic influence that can be felt in everybody I'm going to talk to today, everyone I'm going to coach today, people I'm going to do therapy with today, every phone call I'm going to get on, a Zoom meeting. I'm going to bring my inner radiance to each of those conversations. And then we're actually influencing and transforming the whole entire world, but at one unit at a time, meaning with our own self. So the inner game in leading from the inside out means that the game becomes the growing and the transforming of myself first, connecting to integrity, connecting to kindness, cultivating the qualities of empathy, compassion, open-heartedness, in what I call in my first book, wise mind, the wise mind of the leader, that the leader has to have the larger frame first and foremost, always in the foreground. And that what is the larger frame? Well, in addition to bottom line, the larger frame is what I'm doing each and every day is I'm not only growing my business or the business, but I'm growing people. I'm expanding consciousness. As I enlighten myself, I possess the ability to enlighten others. And that's the transformative shift.
Yeah. So the last 5 minutes or so that we have, I want to ask for two things, if you don't mind. One is a sneak preview into what you're writing without giving it all away. And second is, what are some of the guiding principles that you would share with us so that we can continue that journey? I know you talked about the hour, the power of hour, some of those things so that we can continue to cultivate and create that circle of influence in all realms, right? Energetically and physically.
Okay. In terms of the hour of power, what I suggest that each person do is you could start out with 5 minutes and build to 12 minutes, and then 15, and then get to 20 minutes. Ideally, twice a day. Once shortly after you wake up, I make my coffee and my chai, and then I sit down and I meditate. And then I also do it either before dinner or before I go to bed for a second time. Okay. But the hour of power in the morning is after the meditation part, is then to take 10 minutes. And I would suggest there's three books that come to mind that I would suggest people take time and to read a few excerpts from each morning that inspired them. And the books that I work with one book is called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki Roshi. And what's beautiful about it is each chapter is only 1.5 or 2 pages. Okay. And it's on a particular point, like cultivating the mind. A second book is called The Art of Leadership by John Heider. And that's very, very, it's always been an inspiration to me because I like the Tao Te Ching. And yeah, he takes the Tao Te Ching and he takes a passage and then he applies it to modern day leadership. Okay. And then, of course, my own book, Wise Mind, Open Mind. I think there's exercises and meditations in it that are very, very helpful for the listeners to practice each and every day. And then in terms of my new book, it's called Core Creativity, A Mindful Path to Unlocking Your Creative Abilities. And the core of it is how to transform individuals, organizations, and oneself to become more creative. And I realize we're right there at the time.
Yeah. So what are the last, I mean, you shared the hour of power. Is there any other things that you would recommend for us to bring into our day in order
Yeah, and the last part of the hour of power is in my first book, Wise Mind, Open Mind, I talk about having a mindfulness journal, and it can be actually a written journal where you have a pen and a notebook, or you can, of course, use it like an iPad, an iPhone, or your computer, and to just let stream of consciousness, but you have to do it for 10 minutes. And so the exercise is to write for 10 minutes, whatever came to you in your meditation, whatever you dreamt about the other night, or what's coming through, uncensored, no matter what it is, and just keep writing and writing and writing, and then go back through at the end of it with a highlighter and highlight, well, what are the creative ideas here?
Okay. Oh, and read it and highlight. Okay, I've never done that. Okay.
That's right. Read what you wrote and then highlight. What are the key points? And it doesn't just have to be creative ideas. It might be things, for example, that maybe you're suffering about something and you need to spend some time, with your grief or with your sadness or with your anger. You might be angry with an employee, or you might be angry with your partner. And it's to highlight that so that then later in the day, you can work with that.
Okay. All right. So like to share some closing remarks before we call it a night and call it a morning for you? I know it's 8 o'clock for you. So any closing remarks?
Yeah, there was a great violinist was outside of Carnegie Hall, and he was walking by, Andre Previn, and a fellow came up to him and said, "How do you get to Carnegie Hall?" And he turned to him and he said, "Practice, practice, practice." So I would like to leave everyone with, it's important to practice, to spend time and to cultivate a disciplined orientation to each and every day, to attuning your own instrument, just like as a musician, before I would go on stage and play, I had to tune the guitar. Attune the self. And as you attune yourself, you'll discover a radiance of infinite amounts of possibility with each and every person that you interact with throughout the day.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you very much, Ronald, for an incredible hour of wisdom. Thank you for the meditation, and never thought about rereading it and highlighting. That's something that I will begin with tomorrow.
Great.
So really, really beautiful. Again, thank you very much. Look forward to reading your next book. I remember the example you gave in the last book. It's quite interesting. I had forgotten about it until you reminded me today while you told the story.
I'm touched that you remembered it. That's great.
No, it's amazing. So thank you, Ronald. Thank you. I wish you a great day. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. We're going to be next week starting a 10-week series of 8 steps to self-discovery. And we're going to be with Fionn starting on Monday interviewing. So thank you, everyone. Wish you a good night and see you next week.